Dear human reviewer, I feel so strongly about this video. I feel I need to appeal to you directly. Please let the world see this video. Monetization isn't only about money. Demonetized videos do not reach the public. These two videos here on my channel are the exact same video. This one was monetized for 1 month and got 293,000 views. This exact same video, with merely a different image, nothing changed, demonetized from the beginning, 15,000. This video means so much to me and I feel is so important on a social level that I feel compelled to fight for it. This event was one of the most important historical events in the last 100 years. The only thing I can think of to rival it is Pearl Harbor. And the people I chronicle in this video are never talked about. It is important that people see the human side of this. As you are aware, and the reason this subject is just blanket demonetized is because of all of the BS surrounding it. But the way you break through that BS is through videos like this made by legitimate historians and by people knowing their names. We remember them and we remember that this was not just numbers. Especially young people who were not alive when this happened, I feel like videos like this help keep them from getting sucked into that BS. As you watch this, just ask yourself, is there a company on earth that would be angry at finding out that something played on this video? Thank you. Hello, all of my history-loving friends. This is Madam Morbid. I am your guide on any number of historical adventures. And today we are going to be talking about the crew and the passengers of Flight 175. Again, we are going to start here at the memorial to the crew. This is located in Grapevine, Texas. One thing I didn't do in the Flight 11 video is explain to you what the memorial means. There is a statue of each crew position: captain, co-captain, female flight attendant, and a male flight attendant. The little girl symbolizes the flying public. The male flight attendant is putting a blanket around the little girl, offering comfort. The female flight attendant has her hand in the halt signal. She is holding the little girl's hand and offering protection. The globe represents the global nature of the airline industry, and each eagle symbolizes the two airlines involved that day, and the name of every crew member is listed at the base of the statue. And over the years, they have expanded it to include the firefighters and police. Flight 175 left out of Boston's Logan Airport. By 8:04, Flight 175 was taxiing toward the runway. The pilot was Victor Saraceni. He was a father of 2 daughters, Kirsten, who was 13, and Brielle, who was 10. He was 51 years old. He was a veteran pilot, and in his younger years had been a Navy pilot. He was described as extremely reliable. Though reliable, don't think he was serious all of the time. According to Ellen, he was also a little bit of a jokester. He was affectionately known as the Forrest Gump Captain, because he pretty much could quote the whole movie. And every now and then, if they were stuck on the tarmac and people were getting frustrated, he would walk up and down the aisle, reenacting scenes from the movie. He'd walk up to a woman and he would say, "Those look like comfortable shoes." She said sometimes he'd put on these huge glasses that made his eyes look really big, and he'd just stand there at the cockpit door as people filed onto the plane, I guess to make it look like their pilot was nearly blind. She talked to Victor before he got on the plane, and she said the last things they said to each other were, "I love you." And she knows a little bit about what happened that morning in the cockpit because the co-pilot Michael Horrocks called his wife before they took off. We'll talk more about that call in just a moment, but she said she takes great comfort in knowing that the cockpit that morning was a very happy and positive place and that they were laughing right before takeoff. Michael Horrocks was 38 years old. He was a native of Hershey, Pennsylvania, where he had graduated high school in 1985. In high school and college, he was quarterback of the football team. He went to Westchester University, where he met his wife, Miriam. Today, Westchester University has a statue to Michael Horrocks, whose nickname was Rocks, and he had learned to fly when he was in the Marine Corps. And one of the reasons he went into the private sector was to spend more time with his family. Every morning before he took off, he would call his family and he would sing to his kids. The song was called Good Morning. And on this particular day, his son was in first grade and his daughter was in fourth grade. He sang to his daughter first, and then Miriam took the phone in to her son. And as they were doing this, Victor Saraceni turned on the PA system so everyone on the plane could hear Michael singing to his children. Miriam heard them laughing, and she must have asked him who the pilot was, because he said, it's just some guy with an Italian name. The cabin crew that day consisted of Robert Fangman. He was 33. He had been a salesman for Verizon, and he absolutely hated it. The only part of the job he liked was the travel. So he decided to keep the travel, get rid of selling, and he took a 50% pay cut to become a flight attendant with United Airlines. He'd been doing it for about a year, and he loved it. And he loved foreign cities, dancing, and wine. He liked wine so much, it bothered him intensely to throw away the unused wine in first class. So he had to ask other flight attendants to do it for him. I cannot pour this good wine down that sink. Amy Jarrett was 28 years old, and she loved traveling. She's described as someone who liked taking care of other people. Her boyfriend used to tell her, you need to start thinking more about your own needs. They had met in 1995 at the homecoming of their alma mater, Villanova. She liked gambling, slot machines, racehorses, but she felt bad if she splurged and took advantage of a clothing sale. Mr. Rusconi, her boyfriend, said, we figured we'd get married when we wanted to have kids. They just hadn't reached that quite yet. Amy King was 29 years old. She was working that day with her long-term boyfriend, Michael Tarot. He was 38, and they often tried to get it so that they would be on the same flight. He was a musician. He played multiple instruments, and a bandmate said he was one of the best vocalists I ever worked with. They'd been together about 2 years, and for the last 5 months, they had been living together. They were probably going to move to Florida relatively soon so that Michael could be with his 11-year-old daughter, Gina. Michael's mother, Patricia, said, they were soulmates. I know they were doing everything they could to help the passengers, though I hope they were in each other's arms. Catherine Labori was 42. She was originally from Colorado Springs. She had graduated high school in 1975, and a lot of people use the same word to describe her, vivacious. She had only been married about 2 years, and before being a flight attendant, she had worked as a consultant for Ted Strickland's campaign. She started out volunteering and then later was a paid staffer. By 2001, she had worked for United Airlines for almost 7 years. Alfred Marchand had only been a flight attendant for a few months. He was 44 years old, and believe it or not, was a retired police officer. His family was shocked when, on a whim, after retiring from the police force, he saw an ad for flight attendants, and he signed up for it. And it turned out he loved it. He'd been married to his wife, Rebecca, for 4 years, and they had met to be with each other over the weekend in Boston. Originally, they were from Albuquerque, and she considered taking his plane to go back so that they would have those few hours while they were in the air. But in the end, she decided not to, so that she didn't have to rearrange her flights to get home. Sunday, September 9th, Greg Ernst told his girlfriend, Alicia Titus, that he loved her for the very first time. Alicia was 28 years old. She lived in San Francisco. She had been a flight attendant since January of 2001, and she loved parachuting out of airplanes. She had backpacked alone in Spain and Morocco. She laughed all the time. She made it a rule that she had to be happy. Her boyfriend said that she would laugh in her sleep, and that was something he loved about her. He said he never figured out what she was laughing about. I'd hear her laugh, and I would ask her, "Are you sleeping?" And yeah, she was totally asleep. The plane was only about 35% capacity that day. There were 51 passengers who were innocent, plus 9 crew. I'm not counting the bad guys. There were only 2 people that could be considered famous. Garnet Ace Bailey was 53, and he was a pro scout for the LA Kings hockey team. But he was also a legendary player who had won the Stanley Cup. He'd played in the 60s and the 70s. He played for the Red Wings, the St. Louis Blues, the Boston Bruins, the Washington Capitals. With him was Mark Bavis. He was 31. He was in his second year of being a scout for the Kings. He had also been a player. The oldest person on board was 82-year-old Dorothy Dirigeau. And I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. She was from Long Beach, and she was an artist. She had not gotten her BFA in art until she was 69 years old. She was a watercolor artist. The youngest person on board was Christine Hansen at 2.5 years old. She was traveling with her mother Sue and her father Peter. They were from Groton, Massachusetts, and they were headed to LA to visit Sue's family. And then at the end of the trip, the plan was to take Christine to Disneyland. Another toddler on board was 3-year-old David Brandhorst. He was the adopted son of Daniel Brandhorst and Ronald Gamboa. They had been a couple for 14 years. Daniel was a lawyer for Price Waterhouse, and Ronald was a Gap store manager. The final child on board was Juliana McCourt. She was traveling with her mother, Ruth. Her mother was an Irish businesswoman. Though she had lived in the United States since she was 16 years old, she owned a health spa and beauty line. She named her business Clifford Classique after her maiden name. They were headed to take Juliana to Disneyland. Ruth's friend, Paige Hackle, was going on the same trip, but because they had different frequent flyer miles, Paige was on flight 11, and Ruth and Juliana were on flight 175. But they left about the same time and were supposed to arrive about the same time. Unfortunately, both planes also had hijackers aboard. Finally, we're going to talk about Brian Sweeney. Brian was 38 years old. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1986 and was a naval pilot and instructor. In 1997, he was in an accident that left him partially paralyzed, and after that, he moved to a defense contractor role, which allowed him to mostly work from home. He was married, his wife's name was Julie, and they were living together in Cape Cod. He was headed to LA for something to do with business. That morning before the flight, Ruth McCourt talked to her brother Ron. Ron was in New York City for a meeting. At the last minute, the location of his meeting had been changed to the Marriott at the World Trade Center. Whatever this meeting was, and I've never seen him ever say exactly what it was, it sounds like he was really nervous about it though. And he really worried about, do I look good enough? How should I dress? And he asked Ruth for advice. And he told her, well, I've got this new suit and I've got this bright yellow tie. And she said, that's great. That's perfect. Wear that yellow tie. Yellow is bright. It'll make you stand out. So that morning he was at the Marriott at the World Trade Center. He got there a little early. So he went in the lobby, walked around the lobby of Tower 1, spent a little time in the concourse looking at the sculptures, and then he went back to the hotel to wait. Went in the bathroom, made sure he looked good, and Ruth and Juliana got on flight 175 in Boston at Logan Airport. Apparently, Ron didn't know they were going to be flying that day. Flight 175 took off around 8:14 in the morning. This is about the time Flight 11 was being attacked. And for the first 30 minutes, everything seemed pretty normal. At 8:24 and 8:34, Victor Saraceni hears a couple of strange transmissions from American Airlines Flight 11. The pilot had intended to communicate with the passengers on the plane, but accidentally keyed the wrong control and announced it to the whole world.
Is that American 11 trying to call?
Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're returning to the airport.
15 Southwest of Bono going to Hampton, climbing there.
And who's trying to call me here? American 11, are you trying to call?
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet. Nobody move, please. We are going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
Air traffic controller Pete Zalewski, he's been trying to contact Flight 11 for quite some time. And he said after hearing this transmission is when he knew it was a hijacking. And he said the sound of that voice was so chilling that it not only made him know it was a hijacking, but it was something they had never seen before. He immediately called a supervisor, told him, "We've got a hijacking. You need to listen to this message." Flight 11 then moved into another sector. John Hartling is then tracking Flight 11 as it goes through his sector. Because the transponder is off, all they can see is a blip. They do not know altitude, speed. He needs help looking at it. So he contacts Flight 175 and asks them to visually report what he sees.
Okay, United 175, you have him at 12 o'clock now, 10 miles.
Affirmative. We have him, he looks about 29, 28,000.
Okay, thank you. United 175, 30 degrees to the right. I want you to keep you away from this traffic.
8:41 a.m. was the last time air traffic control spoke with the pilot of Flight 175. Captain Saraceni wanted them to know that he had heard a strange transmission. This is the transmission Boston had heard. But it was the first time that the New York Center had heard about it. Keep in mind that every time they pass into a different area, they're talking to a different tower. Captain Saraceni is talking to Dave Bottiglia. He is located at the En route Center in Islip, New York, on Long Island. This is the third tower that has been involved in this morning's events.
New York, United 175, heavy.
United 175, go ahead.
We figured we wait to go to your center. We heard a suspicious transmission on our departure out of Boston with someone keyed the mic and said, everyone stay in your seats.
Oh, okay. I'll pass that along over here. Hey, Kingston on 93 line.
Go ahead.
The United 175 just came on my frequency, and he said that they heard a suspicious transmission when they were leaving Boston.
Oh, yeah?
Of everybody stay in their seat. That's what they heard as a suspicious transmission. Now, that U.S. Air 583 thought the American he spotted him was at 29.
That was the final time anybody had contact with Flight 175. The attack is estimated to have happened anywhere between 8:42 and 8:46, but air traffic control didn't know anything was wrong until they stopped responding at 8:51.
United 175, recycle your transponder and squawk code of 1470. United 175, New York. United 175, do you read New York? Delta 1489, do you read New York?
Delta 1489, go ahead.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you read New York. United 175, do you read New York?
At this point, Dave is aware that Flight 11 is a hijacking, and now that he has lost contact with Flight 175, he's pretty sure this one is a hijacking too. He turns to his fellow air traffic controllers and he tells them, "Don't ask me any questions, just take all of my other planes. I've got to focus on this situation." And that's what he does.
10. Hello. Do you see that United 175 anywhere? And do me a favor, you see that target there, the 3321 code at 335 climbing? Don't know who he is, but you got the U.S. Air 583. If you need to descend him down, you can. We have a hijack. We have some problems over here right now.
Oh, you do?
Yes, and
okay.
that may be real traffic. Nobody knows. I can't get a hold of the United 175 at all right now, and I don't know where he went to.
All right. Okay, I'll see if I have one.
All right.
Okay.
United 175, New York.
When Flight 11 completely disappears, air traffic control and all of the other agencies involved start to piece together that a fire at the World Trade Center and the disappearance of Flight 11 may be connected.
Anybody know what that smoke is in Lower Manhattan?
I'm sorry, say again?
A lot of smoke in Lower Manhattan.
A lot of smoke in Lower Manhattan?
Coming out of the top of the World Trade Center building, a major fire. Yeah.
U.S. Air 583, go ahead.
Yeah, I getting reports on over the radio of a commuter plane hitting the World Trade Center. Is that Nordo 76 still in the air?
Don't know, but just stand by. Delta 2433, turn left to a heading of 170 now. I have traffic. I'm not really sure if it's good at a 32. Might be descending, might be climbing. I'm showing them at 31 right now.
Heading 170 out of 2433.
United 175, do you read New York?
Situated in the Adirondacks, near an old rail line, was an aluminum bunker that is described as looking like a big, sideways, half-buried beer keg. It was the regional headquarters for the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. Major Kevin Nazapani was the mission crew commander there, and they were going to have a simulated attack that day. And instead what they got was a real one. Boston Center first called them at 8:37 and told them they had a hijacked aircraft headed toward New York and that they needed to scramble some F-16s. Nazapani says that when he was told about the hijack, he literally thought somebody started the exercise early. And he said he actually said out loud, the hijack's not supposed to be for another hour. Before finding out, no, this is real world. At 8:45, Nazapani orders 2 fighter jets into the air, headed to coordinates just north of New York City. They're looking for Flight 11. At 8:51, as Batiglia is learning that Flight 175 is not responding, NORAD learns that something has struck the World Trade Center. With this new information, they ask Nazapani what to do with the 2 F-15s he has sent from Otis Air National Guard Base. They've just taken off, so what do we do now that maybe this plane hit the World Trade Center? This is what he said.
So, if we can find it, we'll intercept it. Did you said something hit the World Trade Center or something that reports? No, keep on going with it.
Talking with ID, and we had a phone call that came down to us saying that they had a possible hijack out of Boston.
Okay.
And I just flipped around, and we always want them for the news. And a 737 hit the World Trade Center, and I was just curious at the same time if that was the aircraft. Last I knew, they had a primary on it, and the track was not squawking 7,500, but it was
Could be it.
under duress.
Send them to New York City, still, continue go. This is what I got. Possible news that 737 just hit the World Trade Center. This is real world. And we're trying to confirm this. Okay, continue taking the fighters down to the New York City area, JFK area, as best as you can. Make sure that the FAA clears your route all the way through. Just do what we got to do, okay? Just press with us. It looks like this guy could have hit the World Trade Center.
One of Michael Horrocks's friends said that there is not a doubt in his mind that Michael would have fought like hell to prevent the takeover of that plane. The ordeal the passengers on Flight 175 went through was no more than 15 minutes. And unlike Flight 11, passengers were well aware that something was wrong and that pilots were no longer flying the airplane. Only 1 flight attendant and 2 passengers successfully made phone calls from Flight 175. They had significantly less time to make reports from the plane than their Flight 11 counterparts, which I think is one reason this flight has been a little bit neglected in getting talked about. All of them were through an airphone, Flight attendant Robert Fangman was able to get through to the maintenance department. His call only lasted about a minute and a half, and in that time he was able to say that they had been hijacked, flight attendants had been stabbed, they had knives, they were in the cockpit. And then he lost contact. And then 2 passengers got calls through. At 8:52, Peter Hansen called his father. Peter's conversations were not recorded, but his father took detailed notes while they were talking. The FBI has a document that records everything Lee Hansen told them from his notes. That's how we have the transcript of what Peter said. He said, "Oh my God, they just stabbed the airline hostess. I think the airline is being hijacked." He reported how men armed with knives had been stabbing flight attendants. How many flight attendants, I don't know. And they were doing this in an attempt to force the crew members to unlock the doors to the cockpit. His father tried to call the FBI, and when he couldn't get through to them, he called the local police and let them know what his son had told him. I had a few people comment that FAA regulations in 2001 did not require the cockpit to be locked, and that is incorrect. In the commission report, it said FAA rules at the time required the cockpit to be locked while in flight. Maybe it didn't have to be when they were on the ground, but in flight it absolutely did. That's probably why they attacked flight attendants first to force them to unlock the doors. As with Flight 11, they claimed to have a bomb. They sprayed mace in first and business class to force everybody to the back of the plane and away from the cockpit doors so they could do their crime unimpeded. The pilot of this flight was extremely violent in the way he flew the airplane. Peter also told his dad that people were getting sick. There was no question. Their airline pilot was not at the helm. They descended extremely fast. They made an extremely sharp turn. They nearly collided with 2 other flights. One was a Delta flight. They only missed by about 300 feet. And there was another one they had a very near miss with shortly before hitting the tower. Peter called his dad again at 9 a.m. These are the transcripts. "It's getting bad, Dad. A stewardess was stabbed. They seem to have knives and mace. They said they have a bomb. It's getting very bad on the plane. The plane is making jerky movements. I don't think the pilot is flying the plane. I think we're going down. I think they intend to go to Chicago or someplace and fly into a building. Don't worry, Dad. If it happens, it'll be very fast." His father then heard him say, "Oh my God," 3 times before he heard a woman screaming in the background and the line went dead. The most famous call made from Flight 175 was the farewell message Brian Sweeney left for his wife on her answering machine. His widow has shared the message for anyone who wants to hear it. She gave it to the Memorial and Museum, who have it posted on their YouTube page. So as I share this here, I have the permission of his widow to do so.
Jules, this is Brian. Lives on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things don't go well, it's not looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I will see you later. Bye, Dave. I'll call you.
After leaving his message, Brian then called his mother. They had a private conversation, but he also told her that passengers were thinking about trying to take the cockpit back from the hijackers. But I think the plane was just flying so violently, and because they had so little time, they were not able to make that plan come to fruition. And if the plane was flying as horribly as he described, it may not have been possible to even get out of your seat safely. Julie says she knows that Brian would have waited until he absolutely knew there was no hope before leaving that message. Because he was sitting on the left-hand side of the airplane, Brian would have been able to see the towers coming. Anybody sitting on the left-hand side would have seen the South Tower, and they would have been able to see the flaming North Tower. The fighter jets said they could see the smoke from as far away as 10 miles. I want to return now to the story of Ron Clifford. Remember, his sister Ruth was on Flight 175 and they had spoken that morning? He was in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel when Flight 11 hit the North Tower. Shortly after impact, he encountered a woman named Jenny Ann Maffeo. She had been waiting for a bus to take her to work, and upon impact, the jet fuel, 10,000 pounds of it, had gone down the elevator shafts and blown out into the lobby and out into the street where she was standing waiting for her bus, and she had been burned. He brought her into the lobby, and he was trying to comfort her and take care of her as best he could. And he realized by some of the things she was saying that she was Catholic, and he asked her if she was, and she said yes. And he said, "I am too. Would you like to say the Lord's Prayer?" And they began reciting it together. And it was as they were reciting this prayer that Flight 175 hit Tower 2, taking the lives of his sister and his 4-year-old niece. After this second impact, they realized, we're not going to survive unless we get out of here. So they got Jenny Ann up and they began walking out. He said he covered her with a tablecloth, just kind of around her shoulders. And there is a photograph of them getting Jenny Ann out of the building and to an ambulance. And Jenny Ann fought for some time before the injuries were just too much. The air traffic controllers in Tracon saw Flight 175 hit the tower out the window. I'm going to play for you now the recordings of the final 3 minutes inside the air traffic control tower, leaning right up until the moment they see this happen out their window.
9. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I got some handos for you. We got some incidents going over here. Is the Delta 2433 going to be okay at 33? I had a climate for traffic of a United 175 that just took off out of a thing. We might have a hijack over here, 2 of them.
10 Center 583.
So is Delta 2433 okay?
Yeah,
coming back?
Delta 33.
Okay. And the Delta 1489 is coming to you also.
Okay,
radar. Delta 1489, contact New York Center now on 134.32.
Delta 1489, 3432.
Delta 2433, thank you for your help. That United just took off, and we're not really sure what he's doing. You thought it was United 767, though.
That's what it looked like.
Thank you, Delta 2433. Flying at 270, join J75, resume on navigation. Thanks for the climb.
Check with your noms. Do you know if anyone down there has done any coordination to scramble fighter type airplanes?
There's 2 big airplanes in there?
No, we have several situations going on here. It's escalating big time. And we need to get the military involved with this.
Wow, what's going on?
Just get me somebody who has the authority to get military in the air now.
All right, I'll go tell them.
Hey, can you look out your window right now? Yeah. Can you see a guy about 4,000 feet, about 5 east of the airport right now? Looks like he's...
Yeah, I see him.
You see a guy, look, is he descending for the building also?
He's descending really quick too, yeah.
Well, that's
2,500 feet now. He just dropped 800 feet in like one sweep.
That's another situation. What kind of airplane is that? Can you guys tell?
I don't know. I'll read it out in a minute. Another one just hit the building.
Wow. Wow. Another one hit it hard. Another one just hit the World Trade.
The whole building just came apart.
Holy smokes. All right. I guess you guys can be busy.
There was an end?
I think an airplane just plowed into the city.
They did. The World Trade Center hit the top.
No, another one. We just saw another one do it.
Another one?
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's 200. One just hit an hour ago.
Yeah, one just a moment ago.
No shit.
Because of the call he made, Peter's family turned on the television. And as a consequence, they, along with much of the nation, saw Flight 175 hit Tower 2 live. It was a wake-up call for everybody. Finally, everybody knew this wasn't an accident. This was coordinated, and no one had any idea how long this would continue, how many more flights could be at risk. Pieces of Flight 175 were found blocks away. The landing gear, one of the engines, and parts of Flight 175 landed on the roof of Building 5. Ron Clifford had no idea anyone in his family was involved in what had happened that day, other than what he had just been through. And he didn't find out that Ruth and Juliana were missing until he finally got home, was getting cleaned up, and his phone rang. It was his brother-in-law, David, asking him if he knew where Ruth was. And Ron's thinking, how do you not know? And he said, well, Ruth was headed to California today. And Ron said, okay, on what flight? At first they thought Ruth was okay because they knew her friend, Paige Hackle's flight, was involved. But when they found out Ruth wasn't on that flight, they thought that meant she was safe. But when David looked up her flight number and said she was on flight 175, Ron knew. In that moment, he knew his sister was gone. Victor Saraceni's youngest daughter, Brielle, was of course devastated. She was also a huge baseball fan, particularly the New York Yankees, and her favorite player was Derek Jeter. On a whim, she wrote him a letter describing how she had lost her dad and the circumstances, and could maybe they meet sometime. Somehow this letter found its way into the right hands. And on September 26th, Brielle and her sister Kirsten found themselves at Yankee Stadium hanging out with Derek Jeter. They sat beside Joe Torre and watched the game. And this relationship with Derek Jeter would go on. They still stay in contact. But Brielle's story doesn't end there. When she was 12 years old, Brielle and many children who lost parents went to Camp Better Days. It had been established by Amy Callahan, who had lost a fiancé. She wanted a place where these kids could get together and support one another. At 12 years old, she met a boy named Sean McGuire. Sean had lost his father on floor 84 of the South Tower. He worked for Euro Brokers. I think Stanley Pramath was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, and I know he worked for Euro Brokers, so they would have been co-workers. Patrick McGuire was 40 years old and left behind 4 kids. Sean was his oldest. And their relationship started out just kids. They went swimming together, they played basketball, and eventually they fell in love. And just shy of the 16th anniversary of their father's deaths, they got married. There was a moment of silence for their missing fathers. Brielle put her father's captain's hat on an empty seat in the front row. During her vows, she said, quote, "The biggest takeaway for me, was that you might be able to break down steel and structure, but you can never destroy love. I would spend my weeks at camp with you, falling in love with you more and more with each day we spent together, wishing our nights stargazing would never end. We grew up together, shaping each other, learning from each other, and grounding one another." Kirsten was married just a few months before in June. I haven't been able to find much about her, other than it sounds like she's happy too. Brielle shares her story through a program with the Memorial and Museum that helps teach young children about what happened. Ellen Saraceni has spent her life ever since this happened advocating for safer conditions for pilots, for better reinforced doors, and this is a fight she continues to fight. For a few years, the airlines were really open to shoring that up and getting it safer. But as the years have gone by and people have gotten more complacent, they have actually started removing or not adding those extra security measures to newer planes. They're actually backsliding. It's really lovely the way some of these people have been remembered. The LA Kings have really gone above and beyond to honor Ace Bailey and Mark Bavis. There are nonprofits that help people that have been established in his name. Bailey had a soft spot in his heart for children and hospitals, and so a foundation was set up in his name that built play areas in New England hospitals. Here's his friend and fellow player Rick Smith talking about Bailey and their time in hospitals ministering to kids.
We used to go to the hospital together and visit kids in the early 70s, and he was the life of the party, and not so much a party, but they brought so much joy and laughter to the kids. And he had a Donald Duck routine, and I'd just kind of follow along behind him, as I did in many cases. A phenomenal individual, and I really believe that in many ways Ace is alive and well. Every time I go to the floating hospital, I look around and I can feel him.
A few years ago, people who knew him and were celebrating his life went to the memorial. They took the Stanley Cup with them so that Ace Bailey would once again be in the same place with his Stanley Cup. Probably one of the best ways they have memorialized Ace Bailey. The name of the LA Kings mascot is Bailey. It's only Bailey because Ace was already taken by a mascot somewhere else. Also, to this day, every single player has a little memorial symbol on their helmets celebrating the life of Ace Bailey and Mark Bavis. I wasn't able to find stories of anybody getting back anything meaningful and personal. I did come across the father of Lisa Frost got back her credit card. Lisa Frost was a college student. She had just graduated and she was on her way home. Her father has built this beautiful memorial. The fence around it is in the shape of the Pentagon. There are two sides with really long spokes, each of which symbolizes one of the towers. He said one day he had a lady come up to him and say, "You're Lisa Frost's dad, aren't you?" And he said, "That is exactly what I want. I want Lisa's name on people's lips, not mine. If people are saying Lisa's name, then it's like she's not gone." I do want to make a correction from episode 1. The name of Myra Aronson. I am pretty sure my autocorrect changed it to Erickson. I don't know why my computer thinks it knows better than me on what I'm trying to type, that it needs to come behind me and change it. That drives me crazy. Myra was 50 years old. She was a professor at Emerson College. She loved France. She spoke French, and she went to Paris anytime she got the chance. Just before getting on Flight 11, Myra purchased a gift online for Sophie, her brother's new granddaughter. It arrived at their home days after she died. She had planned maybe after her visit to California to head on over to Hawaii to meet the new baby. And it was very sad for the family when that didn't happen. Myra, I'm really sorry your name got messed up in the last episode. And to all of Myra's family and friends, I'm sorry for your loss and for my error. Thank you so much for joining me today. My short-term goals are I want to cover the Kennedy assassination in time for the 60th anniversary, which is coming up in November. And then after that, I will go back to cover Flight 77. Check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/MadamMorbid, or you can email me at madammorbidtopics@gmail.com. Thank you for giving me your time. See you guys next time. you.